Good evening and a welcome to everybody. Lots of people wandering in through our virtual door, electronic door, not real door. Welcome to all of you. As you enter, a session that I hope you know is about the power of story. Of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to ask you to put something in the chat. I want you to add your favourite storybook that you use in RE, RME, RVE, Religion and Worldviews, your favourite story, your favourite book. And you can just put the book, or you can add a little bit of information about it or you, that's fine. But I'd love to see a lovely trail of books. Thank you, Nikki, for starting off with the Ramayana. Let's see what we can follow up with. So a whole list of books. Excellent. Sarah Dennis has managed to only do one, which is surprising. Those of you who are just arriving, we're adding we're adding books into the chat that you love using in RE, RME, RVE. So add them to the chat. Perhaps say why it's your favorite or how you use it. Well, you can have a look and see how many get repeated in that list. One of the things we have done, and I'll talk about in a minute, is create a book list, a crowdsourced book list. And that crowdsourced book list, it was interesting to see which book was the most popular on that. If you have a look at that book list later, you will see the answer to that question because we put it at the top. We felt that was the appropriate thing to do. So welcome to everybody. Keep popping those book suggestions in as people keep arriving. But it is 16:31, so we're going to get started. So welcome to this, our In Conversation, as part of the RE Online Focus Week in partnership with CTVC. They're the team behind TrueTube, Pilgrimage, and a wide range of really high quality content that can enrich your RE, RME, RVE teaching. I'm sure lots of you have seen their excellent resource spotlight already. It's got a brilliant film on it and a selection of programmes that they have highlighted. And Hannah has just popped into the chat the link to that resource spotlight. So do have a look at that as well. Welcome those of you who are just arriving. The list that's going into the chat is of your favourite books that you love using in RE lessons. So I was talking about the fact we're doing this week in partnership with CTVC, and we'd had their great resource spotlight. We've also got an excellent blog from Bob, who you can see spotlighted, I hope, on your screen. There he is. He does have horns coming out of his ears, really. He's written an excellent blog on storytelling and how storytelling brings RE to life, in which I'm very pleased to have a cameo. I appear as a wicked queen in that. I know those of you who know me are horrified that anyone would describe me as a wicked queen, but you know, there we go.
No offense was meant, seriously.
He keeps thinking I'm offended. He doesn't know me well enough to know that I'm loving the fact that I've been responded to in some way at all. It's great. Across the week, we've been exploring a whole series of questions. We've been thinking about how different types of stories, sacred and personal and contemporary and media-based, how all of those types of stories help pupils deepen understanding, understanding of different religions and different non-religious worldviews. And we've thought about the ways in which stories can open up windows, mirrors, and glass sliding doors for pupils, helping them to see into others' experiences, to reflect their own experiences, and to step into new perspectives. And we've been thinking about how we can use story more intentionally in our subject, deepening inquiry, sparking discussion, and supporting pupils in exploring different aspects of different religious and non-religious worldviews. Stories not as just a decoration, not as a hook bolted at the start or end of a lesson, but as something really central to make sense of ideas and peoples and tradition and lived experience. So we hope you have found some of our blogs that we've put out already this week really useful. Lots more to come. And Hannah's going to put a link to our blogs in there as well. They cover all sorts of things from the life of a modern saint, Saint Carlo Acutis, to stories that deal with difficult and controversial issues, local stories and stories from real people, stories for very young children, and later today, a novel that makes a difference in the classroom. And of course, story and research. There's many other blogs too. On International Women's Day, just in case it's not on your radar, it's on Sunday. We've got a blog on 8 Sikh women for you to use in your classroom. And a little bit later today, we are publishing our crowd-sourced book list that has unfortunately caused me to visit a bookshop and spend money. But that often happens, and actually I see that as a positive more than anything else. As well as that, we've got a series of films that we are bringing out over the week. I think we've got 3 or 4 films out so far. Stories that shape who we are is that series of films. And we're so pleased that by the end of the week, so by Sunday, we will have heard from a Baha'i, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Hindu, a humanist, a Jew, a Muslim, a pagan, and 2 Sikhs. And I really hope I've not missed anyone out on that list. And Hannah's popping in a link. She's probably already done it. I'm not looking at the chat to the YouTube playlist that you can see that on. And still to come, we've got a research spotlight from the Faith and Belief Forum and more clips of teachers sharing their favourite books. All of these prompts, reflections and resources foreground story as a powerful way into complexity. Stories hold belief, they hold doubt, disagreement, emotion, and context, and they hold them all at once and help pupils encounter religion and worldviews not as abstract systems, but as human and as lived and as situated. So to our panel, who hopefully you can see in front of you. Each of them bring voices from education, from media, from filmmaking. We've got journalism and curriculum thinking. They all work with stories professionally, but in different ways, creating them, shaping them, interrogating them, and supporting others to use them well. And together, they're going to help move us from inspiration to practice. So let me introduce them. Mary Myatt, first of all. Mary is an education writer and speaker. She trained as an RE teacher. She has founded Myatt Co and is currently doing some work focusing on Key Stage 3, the ambitious years, and has had a passion for, as long as I've known her, for sharing high quality text with pupils. So welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Next to Mary on my screen, anyway, we have Bob. Bob is a script writer and educational specialist at CTVC. He's also a former RE teacher, a freelance writer, and a 3 times children's BAFTA winner, oh my goodness, for his work writing and producing short educational films. We doff our cap to you, Bob.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Shazia also works with Bob at CTVC as senior producer and head of training. She leads on content for TrueTube, an RE-focused platform for schools. You all knew that anyway. She has over 15 years of experience producing film resources and delivering film training as well for educators and young people, including working with BBC Education and the BFI Film Academy. And finally on our panel, we have Ruth Peacock. Ruth is a journalist and media consultant. She is one of the powerhouses behind the Religion and Media Centre, which helps the media report religion. And one of their straplines is Religion Matters. And if you don't get their newsletter every morning, you definitely should. It's the first thing I read in the morning when I get to my emails. So that's our four speakers and me. And I probably should have introduced me. I forgot that bit. My name is Fiona Moss. It says it in front of me. I work as the education and I've forgotten my title. Anyway, I work for Cullum St Gabriel's and I support the people doing scholarships and work on RE Online and do lots of things at Cullum St Gabriel's and thoroughly love it. And I'm going to act as the interviewer for our session. It's great to see all of those different books that you have suggested. Ruth Marks is just asking how you sign up for the Religion and Media Centre newsletter. So you might want to at some point add that into the chat. There will hopefully be time for some questions later. It will depend how long we take on our first section. Thank you, Catherine, for putting that newsletter sign up in there. It's done for you, Ruth, don't worry. So I've got an opening question for everybody. And Shazia, I'm going to start with you with this opening question. From your context, which story are you proud of telling or sharing, and why are you proud of that particular story?
Thank you, Fiona. It's when this question was presented to us, it's really hard to kind of whittle it down to just one. So I've got a few. I'm going to try to not talk for too long, but one of the films that I'm most proud of that we put up on TrueTube is a film called My First Pilgrimage. And it follows a story of a young girl who goes on her first trip to Umrah to Makkah. And one of the reasons why I loved it is because it's actually my family. So complete bias, there we go. But that's my nieces and my nephews, and 18 of us went on our first journey together, which was incredible and beautiful. And to do that with kind of knowing that there's going to be a bit of a lived story behind it, and that it's got its own kind of, it's got a platform where I can share that, has been like really special. And I think one of the things that does make it special is I remember my days in RE, and I don't think I had a particularly wonderful time learning about different religions, but I remember being very textbook based. So we know that like Hajj and pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, but we don't actually learn beyond that. So to put up a film that not only features people who are very dear to me, but also kind of shows an experience that's a lived experience and a human experience of what that pilgrimage feels like and is, that for me, it feels like that's the reason why I wanted to kind of share that with you all. So for me, my first pilgrimage, and I won't speak about all the others. So
Shazia, it's beautiful. I didn't know that was your family.
Yes,
but the way you see through the eyes of the children is absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. I love that film. Right, we're going to go to Bob next. It'll be Ruth after that. So Bob, same question for you. Which story are you proud of telling or sharing, and why?
Okay, so I've been making short films for TrueTube for about 15 years now. So trying to think that just one was really difficult. So what I've done is pick a recent one, and that's I Believe in Father Christmas, which is a very short, very low budget animation. And it's about Luke, who's a 12-year-old boy, and he has just started secondary school and is also just coming up to his baptism. And for the first time in his life, he has started to question his faith. And of course, that bothers him. And I have been wanting to make a short film about apostasy for a long time. But for some reason, the people at CTVC aren't sort of too keen on the idea. Don't think it'd be a very cheerful film. So this is kind of apostasy light. It's kind of like a gentle introduction to people questioning their faith. And I just wanted to say to young people, look, it's absolutely natural to question your faith. And actually, it's probably quite a healthy thing because it shows you're thinking about it and trying to personalize it, trying to think about what it actually means to you. So there's that. I also must mention a runner-up because we had a massive success with a film called Refugee, not particularly an RE specifically film, but it's the second drama we made, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we somehow managed to put together a short drama about a young girl who is a refugee, and you don't see where she comes from until right at the end, and she comes from just a normal Western house. So the idea was kind of it could be you, and I had to mention it because that was the one that won us our first BAFTA. So immensely proud of it.
And so you should be, Bob. Thank you very much. I'm loving in the chat people who are going, I love that one. Ruth Marks, you've loved every single one so far, but she does say that she particularly liked the one you've just talked about because she felt it was her own story. Not refugee, the one you spoke about before that.
Yeah.
So I believe
it's funny enough, several people have said that to me. They have said that was my experience. So yeah, that's lovely.
Thank you, Bob. So, Ruth, same question, slightly different stories that you're telling. Which story are you proud of telling and why?
Yeah, I think our definition of a story is slightly different. I think the stories that I'm going to pick out, some of them I wrote myself when I was a reporter. But then when you go behind a desk and you produce things or you edit, then you perhaps have an idea and another journalist will write the story. So this is a collection. So there's one story. I found out there was a secret meeting between a prime minister, this was a long time ago, and bishops talking about the state of the nation. And the word got out, and there was a cartoon in the Mail the next day, and it was all very interesting. There was another story that we did a couple of years ago at the Religion Media Centre on a new Sikh court that was opening up in London. And a colleague was tipped off about that and wrote a great story and got some great pics about that. And there's another story that we did this week, which was the Archbishop of York, and we invited him to take part in a discussion about the BBC and the consultation that's taking place over the BBC Green Paper. And without us knowing at all that he was going to come out with this, he made a very powerful statement about his view of the importance of religion at the BBC, how he felt there was room for improvement, and how that was then written up with headlines about an appalling lack of religious literacy at the BBC. So I would say that the stories that I've just illustrated there, the reason that I think I'm proud of them and the team is proud of them is we got them first. They raised an issue which was of public importance, and we got the story out to other journalists to amplify it after that. So it's just a selection.
Thank you, Ruth. And stories that you've just mentioned, of course, will be used in the RE classroom, particularly that one you reference on the Sikh court there. Really interesting for RE people as well. Finally, the same question to you, Mary. A story you're proud of telling and sharing, and why?
Thank you. So I was really lucky that when I was in the classroom, I had enough copies of individual Bibles for every pupil and student in the class. And what always surprised me was whenever we got the Bibles out, a different kind of hush and concentration used to come over the classroom. And I always wondered what that was. I worried slightly because I thought, oh, are they turning religious? It's not my job to make our young people religious. It's my job to offer them the richness and the content. But the one I particularly enjoyed sharing with them was Genesis 16 and the account of Hagar and Ishmael, and the way that was counterbalanced between Sarah and Isaac, and the conversations that came out of that were just so interesting, so sensitive, so nuanced, and of course a great background not just to Judaism but also to Islam as well. And one of the surprising things I found was that very often students would stay behind. Some of the roughy tufties, would stay behind either at break or at lunchtime to continue reading on. And for me, that speaks to the power of a high quality narrative grounded in original sources. So it was very moving to reflect back on that.
Thank you, Mary. A really important point about the richness of using sacred text in our classrooms from lots of different religions. Right, we're going to go around in the same order. So Shazia, Bob, Ruth, and Mary for this next question, because this one's to all of you as well, and then we'll do some individual questions. So, Shazia, one simple technique that when you tell stories, you use to hook attention in the first 30 seconds that you think would also work in the classroom?
So, brilliant question. One technique that I think we use a lot, and we do discuss this amongst our teams in various conversations, but we like to start with, instead of starting with definition, we start with a person in a moment. Sorry, I've got my niece and nephew decide to join me in this room. I'm trying to bat them both away. Okay, I'm going to carry on. They're going to listen in as well. But so we a couple of years ago we started working on a festival series for TrueTube, and so we are covering different festivals across all the major faiths at the moment. And I think for each film, instead of starting with a definition of like what Diwali is, or what Sukkot, or what Wesak is, or Eid, we started with a person or a showing or a visual representation of what that festival could look like. So it's really trying to convey it in lots of different ways instead of it feeling like it's textbook. So really starting with something that's going to be an emotional response that's going to capture our viewers, and that's going to, yeah, okay, you can say hello now. She's going, off you go. Sorry.
Fine.
They've thrown me off my thoughts. That was it. So just using moments, using human beings, using storytelling as opposed to using things that feel like it's things you can read in a book.
That's really going back to what you said before, Shazia, about your own experience of RE and that being very textbook. And
Exactly.
it's just like that film about Umrah. It's about real people, just like the people who've just appeared in your screen.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much, Shazia. So moving to Bob, and then it will be Ruth. So Bob, a simple technique to hook attention.
Well, it's a storytelling technique generally, I think, is to do something a bit unexpected. So perhaps coming at something from a new angle or from an unexpected angle, just to make a story live a little and lift off the page, or to be looked at in a different way, perhaps. So, for instance, we did a film a few years ago now. We did a short drama about the differences between Sunni and Shia Islam. As a drama, we've just done one kind of a straight, almost a conversation, but this one was a drama, and it basically starts off with someone having an asthma attack, and at the end, someone gets pushed into a pond. So you kind of wouldn't expect that in a kind of educational film about the differences between two denominations, but we did that because we wanted people to think, oh, lean into it and think, what's this? And it's about this. It's about two people getting to know each other from two different denominations, and weird stuff happens. And we do that a lot. So, for instance, we've done Samson as a superhero cartoon. We've done Jesus healing a leper as a sort of a makeover show. Jesus feeding the 5,000 as a cookery show, a TV cookery show. So it's basically trying to come at things from a slightly unexpected direction, which kind of just hooks the attention. Yeah.
And as you say, I'm sure you remember from your days in the classroom, great to be unexpected in the classroom in front of children. I haven't had a chance to have a look at the pictures, but I think there's probably some people dressed in unexpected ways in our session today, it being World Book Day. So unexpected ways of getting in a story. Thank you, Bob. Ruth.
Yes, so most of our material is written. We write for the website, but we also have films on YouTube and we have a podcast. But the teaser into all of those are words on social media, perhaps to flag stories up to attract the audience, and on the website, the headline. And there are people, we have a small team, and we have a very experienced sub-editor who's very good at headlines. And the advantage is he hasn't been stuck in the story for a long time with lots of words. He just sees it and can see it with fresh eyes and think what the headline is. So I mentioned this earlier. The headline where the Archbishop was talking about his concern about the place of religion in the BBC, he did use a phrase at one point, which was this appalling lack of religious literacy at the BBC. And one phrase leapt out, and that was the headline in the Telegraph and the Independent. And we used it as well, slightly tempered. It can be very straightforward. The world's first Sikh court opens in London. We did another story about an imam and rabbi talking to each other. They've spoken in a lot of schools in the northwest of England, and that the headline there was about they'd become great mates. They'd said this as part of their interviews, so we just lifted that out. And those would be, it's the phrases that people say, and afterwards they think, I wish I hadn't said that. That will go into the headline and will hook attention.
So lots of ways of hooking attention when we're telling stories in the classroom, whether those are fiction or whether those are non-fiction. Thank you, Ruth. So Mary, a simple technique that you would suggest?
I tend to pull up a piece of artwork or an image, and so that there's that as the stimulus before starting the story. And one resource that I think is particularly helpful is the work that's come out of King's College London, the visual commentary on scripture, just exquisite, adding layers of depth and significance to the story. But there are others, it depends on what it is. But any of the narrative work that I do always has a high quality image to go with it, to round off both pique curiosity, but also to round off the learning.
Thank you, Mary. And again, all through the time I've known you, you have this idea of we need to use beautiful things, whether that's stories, whether that's art. We use high quality things with children to show them the importance of the stories and the lives that we are sharing. Thank you. I'm now going to have some different questions to different people. You can see that they have got their own experiences here. So we're going to pick a little bit into this. So Bob, I'm going to come to you first on this question. I'm going to ask you and Shazia the same question. When you're creating, Bob, a short film, what you include or leave out to keep it both engaging and accurate for a specific age group, and which 2 or 3 of those storytelling strategies can teachers steal? So when you're creating a film, what are you leaving out or keeping in? And what of your storytelling strategies can teachers steal when they're sharing stories from religion and worldviews or lived experience of people? Over to you, Bob.
Yeah, quite. That's a lot in there. So, okay. So I think so what we have to do when we make a film is we have to decide, we've only got 10 minutes, so we make short media, really short films, maximum 10 minutes. We kind of drift over that slightly sometimes, and then we get told off, but it's got to be really short. So we've got to be really, really focused. So, and that helps concentrate your mind immensely, because if you've got to say something in 10 minutes, you've got to be really, really focused and really, really simple and really, really fixed on that one idea. What's the one thing I want to communicate in this film? And I think that's important in teaching as well, because you can't teach the whole of a religion in one lesson. You can't teach the whole of a religion in one short film. So just be really, really focused. And part of that is keeping the vocab as simple as possible. I mentioned this in the blog, but it's always a nightmare. Well, it's not always a nightmare. It's very often a nightmare interviewing people about their own experiences, or getting them to tell their own stories, or describing their own experiences as a Sikh or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever it is, because everybody uses jargon and they don't realize they use jargon because they're so used to talking about it in their own communities. So getting people to explain things simply and as simply as possible without using jargon, not using definitions that need more definitions to define the definition. So keeping things simple, keeping them focused, keeping the vocab simple as possible. I'd also say, I think Mary touched on this, when you tell stories, you add in kind of sensory details. So you tell people what something looks like, you tell people what something sounds like. You use adjectives to describe what someone looks like and so on. You might even talk about the smell of something if it's relevant, because you're trying to create a picture in people's heads. So when you are teaching about religion and a religious experience, trying to bring some of that sensory experience into the classroom, I think, is really, really important. So our films can do that. So you can show people what the inside of a Monday looks like, for instance, because we've got it on film. But you can do that yourself. You can bring in things like artifacts, pictures that Mary mentioned. When I was teaching, kids would always come in and ask if I was going to be lighting or burning anything today, sir, because I was always having like candles lit and incense burning and that kind of stuff. So it's anything to sort of like bring the senses in and sort of make it a more, I was going to say holistic experience, but that makes it sound a bit, you know what I mean? To make it kind of, make it a more experiential, make your lessons kind of engage as many of the senses as you possibly can.
Thank you, Bob. I'm not sure if you've left anything for Shazia, but the same question for you. When you're sharing these stories to create a short film, what you include or leave out to keep it engaging, and things that we can perhaps steal as RE teachers from that.
No, thank you. Yeah, and I think Bob has covered a lot of it, but I think one of the things that we definitely do as a very kind of initial conversation is to break it down by asking ourselves, like, what is the one thing students need to understand by the end of this film? And then working our way backwards, or working our way towards that rather. And very, very similar to what Bob was saying about really kind of keeping things simple. Like, it's so easy to include too much and to make it really theological and just use jargon that's not understandable. Like, it's like, I'm definitely not an expert in other faiths, even my own faith maybe, but like if we're approaching it from that point of view and like, do I understand what's being said and do I understand what's being taught, then that's a really good way into the classroom. So to keep it from kind of a personal perspective as well. I was trying to think about examples of films that do that quite well, and we've got a film that's not necessarily like religion focused. It's a film on climate anxiety that's under the category of PSHE on TrueTube. And when we were developing that, like, we understand there's loads of anxieties of young people experience about the climate, but what we didn't want to tell them was that they should be feeling anxious about it. So we wanted to kind of, balance honesty with responsibility. So that was one of our kind of key things going forward. And I think we do use that approach to most of our kind of storytelling. We also think a lot about representation. So if we are going to be telling stories of faith, we don't want to anchor one person as a representation of all faiths and all ways of living that faith out. So it is, it's an opinion based to some degree. It's a personal experience, and it's really clear that that's what we're putting forward. This is not the voice of Christianity. This is not the voice of Islam. It's not the voice of Buddhism. It's a person's way of practicing. And that's key because there are so many ways that diverse representation across the board and diverse ways of practicing the faith as well. So I think in terms of classrooms, I think framing is really that's something that needs to be given a lot of care over. The way a story is introduced, the voice that it centers around, how the experience has been described, and then therefore pupils can interpret it in the way that they need to.
Thank you, Shazia.
Can I just add? So
yeah.
Shazia's possibly being a little modest in that she does a lot of training for the BFI and teaching young people how to make films. And I was going to say that actually getting young people to make their own films using their phones, or the teacher using their phone, if you have to make a film about something, you then have to think about it to make it. So that might be another tip, maybe doing a bit of filmmaking with your kids in the classroom is an excellent way because they have to go through the process of thinking, well, the same process that we go through is to sort of think about how we present this on screen and what story do I tell, who do I interview, how do I talk about this.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Shazia, on that. Okay, we're going to move to something very different now. So we're going to move to Ruth. Ruth, some stories about religion and worldviews are quite sensitive or contested or misunderstood in the media. What practical steps can teachers take to help pupils explore these stories in a critical and respectful way. Especially when you mentioned headlines earlier, when headlines or social media or community tensions are in the background. There was an excellent example, well, there was an awful example of this last week when there was the break for breaking the fast in a football match. So, can you think of ways that teachers might explore those stories?
Yeah. So I'm a journalist, okay. There are professional people who advise on solutions, not sides, for example, about how you actually deal with the situation in the classroom. So I'm just going to give you a perspective. You mentioned one story last week. If I just mention a few stories to start with, so people can think about how what I might say may be used in practice. So there's one today in the news bulletin this morning, which is about how Iranians in the UK are responding to the war. And the headline was Iranians in the UK fear for their family amid conflicting reaction to the US-Israel strikes. And that is apparently contentious because some Iranians are jubilant about it as well. So that's one story. Another might be the well, there have been several examples about this, but the man in Bournemouth who prayed outside an abortion clinic, and in the end he was prosecuted. And you remember that J.D. Vance highlighted this and said this is about freedom of speech. And then the other one I've got here is the whole area of Muslim-Jewish relations after the 7th of October, and just refer again to this story that we did on the imam and the rabbi who are talking to each other in Manchester. So those are the kinds of stories I think you had in mind, the kind of flashpoint stories. So this is just some homespun thoughts from me. Check the facts in the classroom, because when you check the facts, you're removing yourself from it a bit, and you're looking at what different sources have said about the football match, about the demonstrations or celebrations online. You're describing what other people are doing, which takes away the sting of it. When you're a journalist, you're looking for the facts all the time so that you're not involved in the story. Try not to be. You try to kind of tell the story dispassionately and objectively. Who do you trust when you're in the classroom and you're going through this with the students? Which sources will you use to find the information about the football match or whatever it is, the abortion clinic and so forth? And there used to be a two-source rule. So if it's mentioned by two different sources, then you could gauge what was true between the two things. Much more complicated now when there are multiple sources and one gets spun by others. But it's a question for the classroom. Who do you trust, and why would you trust them? So it's fact checking, it's looking for the truth, and then it's understanding the story. And that's about what are people telling you about how they feel, what they've experienced. And when you look at what they feel and how they experience, how does that colour their analysis of the story that they've just told the reporter that turns up in the Mail or the Telegraph, whichever newspaper it is? And how does a person's emotional response to a story colour what they think is the truth about the story? So this is a bit like inserting journalism skills into looking at the story in the classroom. So you're lifting yourself away, which in some way takes the heat out of it. But then going to the Muslim, the rabbi and the imam in the Northwest. So I'm not with Solutions, Not Sides. I don't do this for a living. But I have been in situations where there've been discussions and people start getting very cross and emotional about it. And I'll give you this example. We were in Plymouth, and because we do events in different places, face to face as well. And the chief constable came to give a report on how it was important to have religious literacy and understand what was going on in order to police the community well, and a level of understanding. And there were some people in the room who had long-standing grievances or stories that they felt hadn't been fully explored or addressed. And he was obviously very used to dealing with these scenarios and answered with a very straight bat. And we thought, this is really going the way that we'd expected, but he was completely unnerved. And then at the end, when the meeting was coming to an end, he walked towards the people, physically walked towards them who'd been raising the issues, and had a very straightforward, very dispassionate discussion with them. He was quite fearless. He knew that this was an issue, but he wanted to address it in a dispassionate way. And that was pretty impressive. And I wonder whether that's a helpful kind of model of behavior when things start becoming anxious and emotional in the classroom. As I say, I'm not in classrooms really now, but I am in situations where people get cross with each other a lot.
Well, to say you're not in classrooms, Ruth, those tips you gave us were absolutely excellent. The idea of thinking about the fact checking, thinking about the fact that people are talking from their own worldview, their own experience, all the things that affect how they look at a story, and that example at the end. Thank you very much, Ruth. So, Mary, we come to you. A question for you. What does high quality story-led teaching look like in practice? And are there any common pitfalls we need to avoid? Oh, and you're on mute, Mary.
Sorry. That is such an interesting question. I'm going to start with the pitfall. And the pitfall is this, that we don't appreciate the power of them. We're not using stories enough to help our children know more, remember more, and be able to do more. And one of the issues is that when we select a high quality text, and I have some criteria for the texts that are used. The first is, if it's got images, they've got to be gorgeous, because too much of what lands on children's desks is not good enough. And you want to do justice to the content that is being taught. And so you want any kind of images to reflect the significance of the content. The next criterion I have is, I want the tone of any kind of text to be talking to the class as though they're intelligent human beings. I don't want it jazzed up. I don't want it dumbed down. I want it as close as possible to the original source of wherever it links back to. And the third thing I'm looking for is the tier 3 subject-specific vocabulary that takes our young people into the domain. Now, the paradox here with a well-chosen text is that the classrooms that I go into, where there is reading going on of stories, or of mostly in English, because it's not spread across the curriculum yet, there is a different quality of atmosphere in those classrooms from the ones where the children are working either from booklets or other sources. There's a different intellectual energy and warmth that is not evident elsewhere. Now, this is a problem because it's enjoyable. So we're inclined to think if something is enjoyable, it can't be work, but it is. The other thing that happens, which is a pitfall, is people say they don't have enough time to include high quality stories in the curriculum, whether it's in RE or any other subject, to which my response is, well, what is likely to have greater impact on children's learning than a high quality, carefully selected text with a narrative element to it? And I can't think of any. Are we downloading resources from third-rate providers and thinking that's going to do the job, which it doesn't? And then the third issue is evidence. So as a sector, we are obsessed with evidence. Like, a lesson hasn't happened unless there's something in children's books. And if someone comes into a lesson and I'm reading aloud to the class, what does it look as though my students are doing? It doesn't look as though they're doing anything, but it's all happening internally. So we've got some big counter systems to push back against, because there's so much performative stuff and proxies for learning that get in the way of really unpacking what strong, really rich learning is. And so for me, the pitfall is the underestimated power of a high quality text. And the piece of work of curriculum developers, I believe, partly what I'm doing, is selecting those high quality texts with a narrative element that are going to draw children in. There's one that I'd like to work up some resources for at some stage, and that is Amanda McWash's book, But Where Are You Really From? She was the CEO of Christian Aid. Shazia, you're nodding and smiling. I think the power of a story, and it's anything with a narrative element. It's not just fairy tales. It's stories in the biggest sense in which we've been exploring them on this session. Is it's both draws us in and it's also a distancing device. So if I'm listening to a story or reading a story, I'm able to interact with it in a far deeper way. And so one of the things that, for instance, But Where Are You Really From can do is unpick the daily microaggressions that many of our children and colleagues from World Heritage backgrounds experience. It's not meant to be unkind. If you're on the receiving end of that the whole time, sort of saying to a child or a colleague that is unacceptable, to unpack it in a story is much more powerful. I think there are times we need to say that is unacceptable, but we want to get to a space where people realize for themselves, and that for me is the power of a story. The final thing I would say in relation to this, it's an underestimated way of exposing children to high-level ideas. And so I've just worked up a unit based on Richard Holloway's The History of Religion. And very often just use the first few chapters, because people who are working at the top of their game, who really know their stuff, not just convey the content and the concepts and the ideas, they also do it with a sort of flair that means it draws us all in, even if we're not familiar with the content. And so what happens is many colleagues say, this is too demanding for children. And I say, well, give it a go, come back and tell me. No one ever does. And what's missing here is the understanding that our oral comprehension is far more developed than our visual decoding comprehension. So I might not be able to decode something myself, but if I've got a teacher who's reading it aloud, ideally more than once, it means that that richness goes into the DNA of intellectually. So just a few thoughts there. I think it's got the most amazing power to be accessible for every child. And just to finish off very quickly, got the research now backing that up. Dan Willingham's Our Brain's Privilege Story, Dan Pinker, and increasingly the idea that a high quality text with a narrative element to it in whatever subject, including religious education, has really got the power to make big ideas accessible for every child, whatever their starting point. So that's my take on it.
Mary, honestly, you've packed so much into that answer. That's absolutely wonderful. A reminder that some excellent texts have been suggested throughout this session that I'm not going to get Mary to rank them, but lots of them absolutely great and really good to share. And you just took me back to my time in the primary classroom when one of my favourite things to do was just sit and read to children. And I was kind of allowed to do that as a primary school well, I don't know that I was or I wasn't, but I did, and would continue to do that if I was there now. Okay, I'm hoping we might have chance for one or two questions from the chat. So if you've got one, add it in now. But I've got a last question for you all. I'm only going to allow you a minute to answer this, not 2 minutes. So We will start with Mary, and then we'll do Ruth, then we'll do Bob, then we'll do Shazia. Shazia can't go first all the time. So, Mary, the final question for us all is, when teachers hear the phrase, the power of story, it can sound quite inspiring, but it's a bit vague. So, from your perspective, and everyone else from their perspective, what is the power of story in 1 minute, and why does it matter for pupils' understanding of religion and worldviews?
The stories are sticky. That's it.
Brilliant. Stories are sticky. You're absolutely right. I remember so many of the stories, whether they're people's stories or whether they're stories from sacred text or whether they're the narratives I've done in my book group. Thank you very much. I've forgotten who I said was next. Did I say Ruth was next?
I think it might be me, yes. So I would say stories for us are something that happens, like, the reporting of the war, something that's said, like an opinion. We're not going to support the US or something like that, a policy statement, and a human story, somebody explaining their reasons for doing something or explaining their response to a tragedy, a human story. Why is it important in religious education? Because it's the same quest for the truth. It's the same quest for the truth and it's an exploration of human experience. And we're trying to get at it in a different way, but we are still pursuing the same goal.
Thank you, Ruth. So, Bob, we're coming to you. The power of story can sound inspiring but vague. So, what is the power of story from your perspective, and why does it matter?
Well, I think Mary said most of it are just superb. So, I was going to say, I think Mary touched on this. So, stories are better than work. Kids don't think that stories are work, so that's great. Also, stories they help to simplify an issue. I think they kind of help to focus things. So whether that's because it's good versus evil, and then you can sort of unpick that, or whether it's kind of someone's experience, they're telling you what happened to them or how they do something, and it kind of personalizes it, sort of simplifies it because you're hearing it from a person and their experience. Empathy stories are a great way of sort of encouraging empathy. So if you are when you read a story or hear a story, you're sort of vicariously living that person's life in a way, and so it kind of internalizes what's going on in that person's life. So it helps understanding, and I think also telling people stories, especially if someone tells you their story, starts helping you to think about your story and how you would tell your story. So storytelling encourages storytelling, I think.
Thank you, Bob. That's great. Shazia, have they left you anything to say on that question?
Not much. So I'll keep it very short. But I think when we talk about power story, exactly as you said, it can feel really vague, it can feel really abstract. But I think it's really key to understand that it can help students move away from just learning about something. They actually learn to understand something. So in storytelling, it's, that the way that they encounter different kind of aspects and different perspectives means that their approach is going to be met with more kind of curiosity, respect, and empathy instead of potential judgment, which kind of embedded in the way that most people live life, especially in smaller communities. So yeah, I think it's just really helping understand and creating connections.
Thank you, Shazia. Thank you to all of you for answering those questions so well. We have 8 minutes left and some questions which I will ask you. I will pick on people. I will select people to ask them. But if you want to have a go at a question as well, then please feel free to. So this question comes from Jay Savage. Mary, I want you to, I think this is probably in your purview. So if you're reading a story to pupils, do you think it is better for them to just sit and listen and take it in? Or do you think they should be doing something? I think I know what you might say. Whilst you are reading them the story, what's the most recent research on this?
That's such a great question. So the doing is the listening and the thinking. And because we're such a performative profession, always looking over our shoulders to see what the inspectorate might have to say about our practice. And I always remind people with our, if we get it right for the children in front of us, anyone coming in to do any QA should be able to work it out. If they can't, they shouldn't be doing the job. But I'm not teaching Ofsted inspectors, I'm teaching my children. And so I'm going to do what's right for them. And so this idea of always got to be doing something, I think is definitely not necessary. That being said, I do know that there are some contexts where as the story is being read, children are doing visual notes in as much or as little as they want. The main thing is that they are absorbing it. The other thing, just to say in terms of the research, very quickly, the research that came out of the University of Sussex a few years ago found that simply reading challenging complex novels aloud and at a fast pace in English lessons for 12 weeks, no expectations for any writing. They found at the end of the 12 weeks, they had data for 365 year 8 students. The cohort as a whole, their reading ages had increased by 8.5 months. For the poorer readers, it was almost double. You said in 5 minutes, okay, can I get something to eat? I had to come into a Costa because I was running out of juice in the car. So so it was almost double. It was 16 months. And so it was just reading. The thing is, we atomize and we're always busy, but we don't let this stuff seep in. And so it's well worth checking that out, that all they were doing was reading, following along, for the most part, the teacher reading aloud, where the children were doing the right.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit there, Mary. So we will leave it there, and I'm going to give the next question to Ruth.
It wasn't quite successful, but they still got those.
So Ruth, this question is for you, I think. It's from Emma Salter. Back to the point about fact checking. How do teachers navigate the fake news epidemic? I think you said a little bit about this earlier, but do you want to add some more?
Well, I guess, Emma, you have something in mind, perhaps an influencer or somebody that you follow or have seen on social media. And the first thing is to identify people that have been guilty of spreading fake news before, and so you identify the source. How do I do it? You see a story in, say, on the Times, and you wonder if it's new or true, or if he said it, or when it happened. So I look for it elsewhere. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about, Google and ChatGPT. To some extent, it can be a helpful tool. It can identify, has he said this before? Has anyone else said this? So you just check against the story that you're researching to see if anyone else has said it. But there are certain trusted sites for news. I mean, the BBC is a trusted site for news. The agencies, Associated Press, Reuters, the Press Association, agencies like this are trusted sources. But I think that's it. Checking against things and having your antennae out when you're going through social media, so you're watching for sources that you think have got it wrong in the past.
But I think those tips that you've just given Emma and the rest of us, actually, they're what we need to teach our pupils. They have to understand that. And I think that's absolutely essential.
I agree. Just to add very quickly, and I hope this is still to the point, but a friend of mine does teaching people how to teach critical thinking, and there's this Red Riding Hood story, and so I think it's Little Red Riding Hood. Anyway, they're all sitting around wondering where the grandparents have gone. Have I got this right? And they're sitting around the table, and they say, well, why aren't they there? What do you think happened? Did they have their food before they left? Where are they now? So critical thinking is about asking the right questions. I probably got that story a bit back to front, but you get the drift.
I think it was probably the Three Bears and the Porridge that you were referencing, but
Was it?
I could be wrong. Thank you, Ruth. That's again really useful. So one final question. Let's see if we can. Anyone who would like can answer this. This is from Ruth Marks, a nice uncontroversial question for the end. Who should decide which stories are told in our classrooms? Who would like to answer that? Bob, Shazia, you've not answered any of these from the panel. Do you want to have a go at that one, either of you? Or will you have a go at that one?
Don't know if I'm qualified to, having never taught in a formal classroom, but I
Oh,
don't
well,
know.
Bob will
Yeah,
have to do it then.
Bob, you take it. This was more like your thing.
Well, obviously, as who decides? I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, I think obviously, the school curriculum decides, in the end, your specification you've got to follow. But I think you've got to make, if you're getting people into your classroom and to tell their stories, I think, oh, I don't know. I think people have to be, you have to be responsible at how you tell a story and who hears your story. But I think kids need to be exposed to as many stories as possible, as within reason, obviously. But we want kids to hear a wide variety of views. We don't want to hear them just one party line. We want to hear them a wide variety of views. And so not all Muslims think this way. Not all Christians think that way. They're not all monoliths. So you want a variety of views. It gets complicated, it gets messy, but you want that variety. Who decides what's right and wrong? I don't know. I think kids, you want kids to have you got to teach them the skills to decide for themselves what they think is right, or to realize that actually sometimes lots of things can be right at the same time. It's kind of it's complicated.
It's complicated. Sticky, it's complicated. We have heard so much wisdom from all four of you in this session. So thank you so much to all of you. And thank you to all of the rest of you for coming at the end of a busy World Book Day. We will publish a recording of this session for you to watch again or to share with somebody. And there'll be a digest of everything that we've published this week. The recording of this will take a week or so to come out because my colleague Hannah's got to subtitle it all. And the digest will come out early next week of everything that we've published. Hopefully you saw some of the links in the chat. Our next focus week is on ways of knowing. And just as this focus week was held in partnership with CTVC, that one's being held in partnership with the National Association of Teachers of RE, NATRE, and that's on ways of knowing. And that's in the week beginning the 17th of May. Our In Conversation in that week is on the Tuesday, don't get confused, not the Thursday, Tuesday the 19th of May at 4:30. If you don't want to miss things that we're doing, then do sign up to our newsletter. And you can find the sign up to our newsletter on our RE Online website as well. Thank you very much to our speakers and to all of you. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. I'll stop recording. Oh.